To get the, we call it outside and slightly elevated perspective, it takes some time. You can't do it in your desk with 100 emails and your project management tool and your task management tool and the phone ringing. You can't get that kind of perspective. You really do have to step away.
You're listening to the Profit by Design podcast, episode 44. You work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question: what has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling, the business psychologist, the author of How to Hire the Best, and your co-host on the Profit by Design podcast. Weekly, my co-host, Mike Bruno, and I bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests, who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real-life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Profit designers, there is no better way to get yourself out of the weeds of your business than to start planning your 4-week vacation. Because as you plan a 4-week vacation, it forces you to start thinking about how does your business run without you in the middle of it. If you're ready to get started planning your 4-week vacation, go to 4weekvacation.com and download my 4-week vacation jumpstart guide. Profit designers, I think today's episode might blow your mind. We're going to talk about systems with Josh Fonger of Work the System. And I just have to tell you, we're recording this episode the day before I'm out of here for my 6-week vacation. And I've been feeling some guilt coming back from a 4-week vacation mid-January and then turning around here in mid-May, taking a 6-week vacation. And some of that guilt has been that there are things that need to be addressed in the business and things that are not smooth, that are not running like they should. And because I have taken or set up to take a 6-week vacation, I have really had to dive in the last 6 weeks to address those things. And what I'm so aware of today as I'm getting ready to head out for this 6-week vacation is that had I not had this 6-week vacation scheduled, I would have drug those things out maybe for a year. And so there's something to be said for putting deadlines on ourselves and creating a sense of urgency as we get into creating systems. And I think today, as we listen to Josh and what he has to say about systems, there's some limiting beliefs that a lot of us entrepreneurs carry around about systems that Josh is going to dispel for us in this episode. The other thing that we get into, though, is the concept that dysfunction in our businesses is gold. There's a lot in that. And so I invite you to sit back, listen, take this in, and then I'm really curious to hear your reactions and what you start thinking about from this conversation that Mike and I have with Josh. So with that, let me share his bio with you. Josh is a business performance architect and the co-founder of Work the System. As an international business consultant, coach, and speaker, he's had the unique experience of personally helping thousands of businesses grow systematically using the WTS method. In a nutshell, he helps entrepreneurs make more and work less using systems. So profit designers, I think you're going to like what Josh has to say. Let's dive in. So Josh, this is going to be a fun conversation. Mike and I love to talk systems with you, and we've both been reading through the book that you all use with your clients, Work the System. I've gotten some great ideas from it and some questions for you, and I know Mike has too. So Mike, I'm going to let you jump in right here with Josh and ask him some questions.
Sure. So there's one title, I think it's in the beginning of the book, or a headline, and it says Dysfunction is Gold. And it really resonated with me because I think my name was printed right after it because I had a lot of dysfunction at different times in my career. But on that same page, I believe there's another sentence in there that says, I'd like to call this the mini awakening, getting it. Can you dig into that a little bit? Because I know mindset is crucial for business owners and entrepreneurs, but can you dig into what that means for you guys?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And when I first met Sam Carpenter, my business partner, 8 years ago, I thought it was just about, tactics. But you build these systems and then the company will immediately get better, which is true to a point. But if you don't have the mindset, it never happens. And I remember when Sam and I both heard that phrase for the first time, dysfunction is gold. It was with a consulting client up in Canada. And there was some dysfunction, like a lot of dysfunction. And it was kind of overwhelming. It was an international company. And we usually work with smaller companies, but this one was doing over $50 million in sales and it was growing a lot rapidly. And the owner of the company, one of the owners, he said, "It's okay, guys, because dysfunction is gold." And then Sam and I were both like, okay, we need to use that in our messaging because it's true. And if you can see it, I think most people don't see it and they don't see that there's a way out of it. And so, yeah, once we heard that phrase, we're like, okay, well, the more dysfunction we see, then we know the more easy it is going to be for us to free up the owner, to allow them to make more, work less, and scale because it's right in front of us. And most people don't see it. So I think that's an important aspect. And we like to remove, the emotional ties and a lot of times owners take it very personally. They get very involved in a lot of things. And what we try to do is separate them and see the business as a separate entity. It's a vehicle that produces value and you want to produce more value, which needs to scale. And so if you separate yourself from it, then it's easier to analyze it from an outside and slightly elevated viewpoint. That's what we call kind of the mindset shift or the work the system mindset is to have this viewpoint. And if you do, then it's easier to, if you're looking down in a city, it's easier for you to see the traffic jams. It's easier for you to see the car accidents. It's easier for you to see the problems in your city on your perspective. And so that's a big part of the starting place is to be objective with the dysfunction and not to run away from it, but run towards it and run towards it with a tool that will alleviate it long term.
So I think that is so exciting because I know our listeners are sitting here thinking about all the dysfunction in their business and recognizing it now as gold. I personally am after reading the book. And the piece that really caught my attention along with that is the statement, get the machine right and emotional improvement tags along naturally. As a business psychologist, I see so much value in this because one of the things that causes turmoil and chaos in a business is all of the finger pointing and blaming that starts going on. That is a symptom of systems that need attention.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And you can't, if things are really bad in your business, it's not normal to be happy about it. And that's okay. Right? You shouldn't feel satisfied or happy or content if things are really going haywire, but it doesn't mean that you can, wish your way out of it. You do have to take mechanical steps. And so that's what our whole program is about, is to build a plan and to identify the first step and realize that you can't build it in a day, but you can build one asset, one piece today. And that piece can endure for, years potentially. And then you build the next piece, and the next piece. And it's a very non-sexy way to solve business problems, but it works in reality. That's why we do it.
Sure. Yeah. And the emotion thing was always a difficult thing for me because it certainly I had a lot of negative emotion, right? And I allowed the emotion to dig into how I was operating the businesses that I had. And it was very hard for me to make a shift, until I surrounded myself by the right tools and techniques and learned about it. But I guess what I'm saying is that the importance of the mindset shift to more of a positive emotional environment and not a negative emotional environment, because I also had a period where I had no emotion. Have you experienced that with other entrepreneurs where they're so frustrated that now they're just like the wall's up and it's just blank, no emotion, and they're kind of stuck in the middle?
Yeah, well, over the years, I've had a lot of different emotions with companies, with my clients. And one in particular, as you bring this up, he just hated his business. He hated going there. He hated seeing his clients, his customers, his employees. He just never wanted to go there again. And so he hired us to get in there and get him out of the business. And after a few months, and he recorded this long testimonial about it, but he said, now he loves his business. Now he loves going to work. And so he went, we basically got him out of the role. So he's working 70 hours a week down to essentially no one needing him there. And so he wasn't there at all for a few months. And then he said, you know what? I kind of miss the business. I kind of want to open a new location now. I kind of want to get involved in this and that. And so he came back refreshed, but he had not taken any time off for so many years that he was just mentally, some people, they need to sell it, but other folks, they just need to get away and then come back. And I think the thing is, when you're so beat down and defeated so many times in a row, it does mess with you psychologically, and a break helps. And then some wins help. In Sam's book, he talks about just a little win where he just wrote one procedure. This is when he was, near bankruptcy and his health was failing and everything was failing. And he wrote one procedure about how to deposit checks. This is like 18 years ago. And then he said, you know what? This one piece of my company, and there's, 400 separate systems. This one system is really good. And I never have to do this again. And it's going to work flawlessly. And for the most part, it does. And it did. So then he used that as a springboard to the next piece. And it's when you think of the whole thing, it's overwhelming, especially for small companies. And I think that's the big issue, is that small companies compare themselves to established companies, to bigger companies, to seasoned companies, as opposed to just, Sam calls it a minority of one. Just look at your own business and who cares what everyone else is doing? If you're providing value for your customers, your clients, that's the thing that matters. And you stay hyper-focused on that instead of looking at a company that's got, 10 years and $10 million more than you do.
So one of the things that you said, I think, is really worth us underscoring here. And that is the feeling that we have when we're in the middle of it and the stress is built up for so long, that need to take a break and get away from the business. So for our listeners, if you're listening to this and you're feeling like, yeah, I really just don't want to go in. If I could get away with not being at my business, I would love that. To recognize that as a sign that you're probably too much in the weeds and you do need that break. I know for myself, as we're recording this is my last day in the office before I'm out for 6 weeks. And I am really looking forward to the opportunity to look at my business with distance, because it's been a very intense 4 months of growth for us. And I feel like if I don't have this opportunity to step out, we're going to be pulled under by the chaos that ensues from the growth. So I feel the need to step out and look at the higher level of things.
Yep. It's, same with personal life, same with a lot of things in life, is you need that perspective. And to get we call it outside and slightly elevated perspective, it takes some time. You can't do it in your desk with 100 emails and your project management tool and your task management tool and the phone ringing. You can't get that kind of perspective. You really do have to step away. And the more, the better in terms of making good judgment calls, because that's the job of the owner, is to steer the ship and to make good decisions on behalf of the team. And they're in the middle of the mix, no perspective.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think, we've talked about this a couple times on a couple different episodes, the frustration level when people try to put systems in place that maybe don't work, or they don't give it enough time to start to work, and they try to bite off more than, is just reasonable in changing the systems and the way the business operates, it just creates a cycle, right? Where they have some euphoria, which is short-lived because they put some systems in place that they feel like are going to work. They stop working, or they're not working the way they expect them to work. They start to pull back, they get frustrated, and they go right back in the weeds again. So in your experience and opinion, when somebody starts undertaking systems change and they start putting things in place, what do you tell your clients in terms of, maybe how to align the priorities, and then what to expect in terms of, the time frame?
Yeah, well, I definitely tell them that work the system as a solution is not a quick fix, and it's not a silver bullet. It is a way of doing business. It's a way of life. And so you might get some big wins quickly, or it might take some time. But the main thing is you have two options. You can either approach the business and your life in a way where you have more and more increasing levels of control, influence, quality, efficiency, or you can increase life in a haphazard, emotionally reacting to everything. And so it's first as a choice. And then after that, you get to choose how fast you're going to make it happen. Smaller companies, it does take a little longer because they don't have a team of people to delegate a bunch of work to. And they don't have as much of their business figured out. So it takes some time, sometimes years, to figure out exactly what does the customer want? Exactly how should we provide this service? Exactly how do we, do whatever we do, and to build a team of people you trust who are good at their work. So it can take time. And I think that's the one thing that people makes them fall away the fastest is they don't stick with it long enough to see the fruits of it. That's why our program is 4 months long. We tried doing, a 2-month program, a 2-week program, a 1-weekend program. And whenever we tried shortening the duration, the results went down because we didn't give it time to stick, and we didn't give them time to take this philosophy, put it into reality, and have the, all of the different pressures that reality brings, cash flow pressures, employee pressures, sickness, losing a big account, all the pressures that happen in a business. They need to, bounce against your new framework, your new philosophy of doing business. And I will tell you that cash flow is definitely one of them. I, built kind of a special module just about that, because if you have cash problems, people start to abandon all strategy and try to make some sales. And we really want to make sure that you have that figured out, you have a cushion, you built enough margin to your business, and then you can start working on the non-urgent important things, which are systems.
Boy, I so agree with that, because several things that you said are really resonating with me. We see in our clients, we have to help them implement a system like Profit first so that we can stabilize the cash flow, because that pulls our attention as entrepreneurs right into crisis mode if cash flow is not handled. And the other thing that I, as a coach, really want to highlight about what you're sharing, there are so many quick solutions out there in internet land when it comes to working on our businesses, but those are Band-Aid solutions. And when you're talking about working on a system of your business, that's producing a transformation. And there is a difference between a Band-Aid solution and a transformation. Transformation takes time. And it's like I think about us having a little snowball. And I used to live in Wyoming. And if you've ever been to Jackson, Wyoming, there's tons of snow, but the snow is really dry. And if you stand at the top of the Grand Tetons and you want to get a snowball going and roll it down the mountain, you have to work really, really hard to get a few pieces of snow to stick together to get that snowball going. But once you get that going, you get the momentum that builds, and that snowball gets bigger and bigger as it rolls down the mountain. And that's really, for me, what I find about systems in my own business. It takes a heck of a lot of energy. I yesterday had to stop and start working on a system to address a big problem we have in the business. It pulled my attention from everything else. A huge amount of energy and undertaking, but at the same time, I know the impact as that gains momentum in the business is going to be very significant for us down the road.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Most people, it doesn't stick. And the reason why we find it doesn't stick is because they have no overarching strategy or purpose or direction, mission, values, mission, whatever you want to call it. We call it a strategic objective. They don't have a place they're trying to go and a plan to get there. And therefore, there is no reason to write systems, because we're just living for today, that we're living for tomorrow, as opposed to, hey, we're building something to last. We're building something of value. And the only way we're going to get there is if we build these assets over time. And once you have that, I guess, that true north arrow to build onto, that's what really allows the systems to stick.
That's a really good point, because many entrepreneurs live in a state of chaos, and like you just said, finding that true north and then having a plan in place and a roadmap and then developing systems around it is the key to get out of that chaos. And I think it's in Appendix B of the book, there's a Centratel's 30 Principles. There's one note in there that talks about fire killers, and we are not fire killers, we are fire prevention specialists. We don't manage problems, we work on system enhancement and system maintenance in order to prevent problems from happening in the first place. That's huge, because as an entrepreneur, if you can hold on to nuggets like that and understand that chaos should not be the normal, and it's not a badge of honor to be running around 16 hours a day dealing with chaos and putting out fires, right? The badge of honor is taking the step to find the true north, like you said, and start working on systems and chipping away at these inconsistent, inefficient things that are happening in your business and your life.
So I used to work at Centratel. So I used to live in Oregon, Bend, Oregon. Centratel is still there. And that's what the book is written about. It's all true. I mean, I would go to his office. Sam and I were working on the company when we started it. And it was, a serene, peaceful, money-making machine. Everyone got in there. They're happy. Everyone showed up on time. There was no drama. No one wanted to leave. The employees were paid really well. It just was like it was like a sewing machine. Like everything just had a place and everything was in the right place and it was all thought out. And people see that. They're like, oh, I want to do that. That should be easy. But it was the commitment to this, the strategy and then the willingness to do it. And the vast majority of companies don't do it. They won't do it. They're not willing to do it. It's, it seems too hard, and it is hard. But the alternative is to be a slave to your company, which is also hard. So you're going to have two hard choices, but one of them ends in freedom, which can come quite quickly. The other one ends in just going under, and which is the vast majority of companies. They just burn out and go under. And so I think the choice is easy, but it does take a leader who has got some courage and willingness to do something different than they've done before and different than what their peers are doing, because most aren't going to do it.
So serene, peaceful, money-making machine. I just want to meditate on that.
Seriously. I was picturing the mountains and the sky, just sounds beautiful.
It does. And I love how you just describe it, Josh, as we have a choice we're going to make. And are we going to choose chaos, or are we going to choose the serene, peaceful, money-making machine? I know my choice. I think Mike knows his choice too. One of the things that I really want to pick your brain on, and this is a personal interest question. I'm somebody who creates systems with a lot of steps. And when Sam wrote in the book that the first system he created for the deposits was 53 steps long, and in the book, it lays out, the very basic, like you set the box on your desk, you open the box, and I'm like, yes, I love this. And I also wonder, will team members tolerate a system that's 53 steps long? And the reason I ask this is because our onboarding checklist at Tap the Potential, last I checked, I think was in the 40-step range. And we're about to do a big overhaul and improve it. So I'm imagining it's going to get closer to 60 or 70. Talk to me about how many steps and how detailed should we be when we create these systems?
Right. Well, part of it's a matter of preference. Part of it's the matter of the audience and the dynamicness of your business. And in Sam's case, they are a precision business. They don't make mistakes. Like that's part of their quality control. They make one mistake for every 15,000 phone calls, which is like 500 times better than the average company in their industry. So they can charge a lot more. And that's a big deal to them. Other industries, your big thing is speed or innovation or flexibility or creativity. And so, the systems are going to kind of reflect that culture and reflect what actually matters, right, to your business. I worked with this coaching company once, and they really cared about the dress code and everyone showing up on time and this and that. And I said, you got all this information about things that don't matter. These coaches are on the phone. They don't see the coaches. Where are your systems about, making connection with your clients and systems on upselling and things like that? And so they were kind of missing point. They're focused on the wrong thing. And I think this happens often as people read this book and they get really excited about it. And they have to also understand the audience, right? So who are you writing a system for? So I was writing the systems with the chief marketing officer of this quite a large company. They had over 100 employees. And so do I need to write, a bunch of procedures on basics of marketing for this person? No, right? They already have lots of education, lots of experience. They just need some outlines and some guidelines to make decisions and strategic decisions. But if I'm going to bring someone on who's 17, who's an intern, they don't have a lot of experience. And so the procedures need to be much more detailed and, just dumbed down for the right audience. And so I think that's a big thing, is think of the audience. And then we always write the purpose or the objective at the top. So ultimately, what should get done when you finish this process. And as long as that's on top and we enable the people to innovate, if there's a better, faster way to get to that end result, then they don't feel as enslaved by the steps. And, just a few more myths. I mean, I could kind of riff for a while on this, but once somebody has internalized the steps, they've done it a number of times, they don't have to carry it around with them in front of their face all the time or check off every step every time because they've done it so often, right? Then you use the procedure as a reference tool. So as they come up with a new idea or as a problem arises or as a new person comes on board that has to get trained, then you go back to it. And then you refine it and dust it off and make it better. But, the people that we work with, they don't carry around a procedures manual and stare at it all day long, right? They use it as, a reference material for training, cross-training, updating, innovating. But, once they know how to do their task, because they've done it over and over and over again, then they don't have to stare at it nonstop.
So that's a really good point about what is your area of innovation. A lot of our listeners are pumpkin planners. And in the pumpkin plan, when we're defining the business sweet spot, we're looking for what is the area of innovation for the business. Is it going to be ease, speed? Like you said, Centratel is accuracy. And so understanding that area of innovation and allowing that to guide how you create your systems and then the end user of the system. I'm curious, what are some best practices or not necessarily best practices, but places for documenting systems? Because we have cloud technology now, and there's lots of ways to have our systems in the cloud. Should we have them written out? Do they need to be printed in manuals in the cloud? Are there certain platforms that you recommend?
Yes, a lot of recommendations. It depends on, of course, the business, the size of the business. If you're a solopreneur, startup, then anything you do is going to be fine. Whether it's on a notebook paper or it's in your Evernote or it's in a Dropbox folder, anything is fine because you're just kind of formulating your ideas and they're going to change a lot. And your procedures are probably going to be loose. They're going to be outlines. They're going to be guidelines. They're going to be reference templates from things you've done before that you're going to want to work with. As your company gets more mature, then the technology matters more and more and more. Almost everyone puts it on the cloud now or some kind of internal network they can access, and you can get more and more advanced. So if you have 50 or more employees, then you're probably going to want to have a bunch of automations and the ability to sort and track and monitor what your team is doing. If you have two, then that doesn't matter because you are very close to where the action is. And so a Google Drive or Dropbox would be just fine for most small businesses where they don't have any kind of legal issues or healthcare issues where they have to have privacy issues around it. But I do like to have everyone also have a notebook or a binder with their specifics that they go through consistently or they go through regularly. And it's optional. I don't force it on people, but I say, if you're going to do something regularly that's complex or you have a checklist you want to reference regularly, write it, print it off and put it in a binder so that you don't need to use up your computer space, one of your windows on that particular procedure. It can just be a quick reference. It can be right next to you and you don't have to always be trying to look and sort and find that particular procedure. It's just faster. Also, more traditional companies will typically have more things printed off and more binders like a department binder or a location binder or a manager's binder. But smaller companies, it is typically less. But I don't focus a lot on that in the beginning because I just want them to get started with the strategy, with the philosophy, with the buy-in, and then just start to kind of see or feel the difference. And usually it's felt first, right? Before it shows up on the bottom line in terms of profit, the owner just feels like, hey, there's less mistakes. And then the team starts to feel like they have a little bit more time. And then they start to see the customers a little bit happier. And then it starts to snowball, using your analogy, into, we really do have a lot of time and we do have more money. And now we can do some more R&D and grow. But I start really small. I don't want people to even worry about that. We talk about in our program, I think it's week 8 or week 9 before we actually talk about technology, because it's not something that is going to make or break this effort.
It can be a distraction.
Yes. Oh yeah. I mean, then you want to, add your brand and your logo to it, and you want to play around with the colors and the fonts. And then you got people, it really produces a lot of stress and anxiety in your team because they're worried they're going to write it wrong, or they're going to save it wrong, or they're going to name it wrong. And then you got to have a committee and discuss, should we put the logo on the top or the bottom? And what about the footer? And it's totally irrelevant. None of those things provide value. And so I'm fine if they just use handwritten notes and they just tape it to the wall, because it has to actually do something of benefit. So you go to Sam's office, there are certain doors that says, close this door quietly. There's certain places in the office that say, no making popcorn during these hours. There's certain just little notes on the actual physical objects, because that's where you need the note. That's where you need the procedure. The bathroom and break room procedure is stuck to the wall right where they grab their fobs, where they can do their bathroom and their break room time. So it's really thinking through, what is the purpose? And the purpose is not a bunch of procedures or a binder or to even look nice. That achieves nothing. It really is to do that particular task in a best way possible, consistently, in a scalable way. And so that really can be, I really try to push that, because people who are like it to look nice, I've seen a lot of I've seen probably a million procedures. I've seen a lot of the ones that look really nice, but they don't provide any benefit because they're just too complex. Just a little side tangent. I worked with this company where they had a PhD in communications, and this guy was going to write the procedure for procedures. And I explained to them it's a very simple document. You want to make sure everyone can do it. So, don't make it overly cumbersome. And he wrote this 5-page dissertation about how to write a procedure. It was so complex, I didn't know how to write a procedure anymore. I was like, well, I can't write one for this company. He was going through all the different grammar and the participles and gerunds and all of this different, grammar terminology I didn't even know about, and nothing got done. He released that and the progress stopped.
I just have to say, shout out to us PhDs. The biggest thing we have to unlearn after we get that PhD is that simple is better.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a lot of my clients, well, not a lot of them, but if my clients have a really hard time moving forward with a new idea or new innovation, I'll ask them what kind of grades they got in high school. It usually ends up that they're 4.0. They're like the valedictorian students. And I say, that's your problem, is that you have to make mistakes. Whatever you're going to release will be wrong the first time for sure. So just move forward, and then bigger skill set is innovation than perfection as an entrepreneur.
I'm chuckling along with you because you're calling me out. This has been my life's journey, is to get past perfectionism, because I had a 4.0 in college and that screwed me up. I've had to undo that the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, maybe you need to, come up with a new grading system. Give yourself an A if you make at least 10 big mistakes a week or something. I don't know.
Thank you. This is very therapeutic for me, Josh. I appreciate it.
It's funny. I guess that's why I'm good at systems, because I didn't have a 4.0.
Yeah.
So Josh, what are some tips you can give to some of our listeners that are faced with some resistance from employees for new systems?
Well, I think that's, first off, don't let the employees dictate the future of the business. I think that's important. It is your business. You do have to be the dictator and the leader. And if you come up with a better way to do something and they're holding you back, then they might be the wrong employees, right? They do need to follow the leader. I think something I really noticed with Sam as I watched him is he, was very clear, is I'm going to make this a great place to work. Here's the strategy. Here's the way we do things here. And if you want to get paid here, you have to buy in. But if you don't want to get paid here, then you don't have to buy in, because you'll be gone. And he was very quick to let anyone go if they weren't going to buy in 100%. So that backbone and that willingness to stick with his guns no matter what really does matter a lot. And the people who are the right people appreciate that. Cuts out so much wasted time and so much wasted energy if you can be like that. But in reality, if you've already kind of been really loose with strategy, loose with leadership, and your team is used to you not following through, and you have that history, and you've got family in the business, and you just, like a normal business, there's dysfunction, then the transition needs to be done a little bit more delicately. And so the way to do that is to remove it from, hey, this is Josh's idea, to here is the company strategy. I want to push towards this. What do you all think? And typically they're going to say, sure, it looks good. And you say, well, if you've got ideas, let me know. But this is what we're all going to believe in and go with. And once they all agree to that, then we do the principles next. And then same thing, get them all to agree to it and verbalize it. And then we just move on, piece by piece by piece. And typically somebody will try to test it. They're going to go against it. And we quickly put them in line, or we remove them from the business. And that is the way to make it stick the best, is to make sure that people know you're serious. But the results come. Once the results come, then people buy in. But there is a few month period where they test you. They test you to see, are you really going to do this? Is this going to stick? Because it does more work for them up front to build these systems. And it does logically necessarily put them at some level of risk, because if all of their trade secrets in their brain are put down on paper, then they are, a little bit more expendable. And they know that, and you know that. And so you don't single out one person. You say, as a company, even you as the owner, everyone's going to do it together. And so we can analyze each thing and make things better, and so that we can grow. So if you say we're going to build systems and we're not going to grow, then they get afraid, because they know that they can get replaced by lower cost labor or automation. But if you say, hey, we're going to grow to this bigger and better place, and the only way for you to move up and for us to scale is to get these things documented and perfected, then they're much more apt to get engaged. I think the vision and the future does matter a lot for the buy-in and the consistency. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and the pace. Some companies, they do it really fast and they have lots of blood on the ground afterwards. Other companies, they do it slower, over years, and no one gets fired, but the implementation is weaker. That typically happens with family businesses, because they can't hold their mom as accountable, and they can't hold their sister as accountable. A few steps forward is still better than staying in the same spot. So they still get a lot of benefit out of doing it.
Yeah. I work a lot with small business owners who are going through a transformation. And as they're taking the business through that transformation, I always tell them, you're going to lose people along the way. The team that you have now is probably not going to be a fully intact team as we go through this transformation, because as we start laying out, you all call them in the book, the operating principles, we talk about immutable laws. And I think there's some difference between the two, but the general idea, like, this is how we're going to do things around here. As you start laying those out, the people who are willing to fall in line with that and want to be a part of that will stay. But it's very easy to see the people in the room who don't want to be a part of that, who are going to resist, because you can just watch the body language. And if you do it over a Zoom call, if you're cloud-based, watch the body language. And don't be intimidated by that, because I think the big fear is it's so hard to get employees. If I lose these people, then who do I have? What you're creating is a great place to work, because it's going to be serene, peaceful, money-making machine. That's going to become the new mantra in my life. Serene, peaceful, money-making machine. But it's going to be that, and that's going to attract the right people that you need in the business.
Definitely. And if you have, you have to always deal in reality. If you have somebody that you really, really can't fire because they have some special secret knowledge and they're related to you or whatever it might be, then you just have to come up with an innovative solution around it. So I call it quarantining, probably a nicer way to say it, but you basically say, okay, this person, Jim, he does our outside sales, and he doesn't follow our teamwork strategy. He doesn't follow our decorum and our timeliness and everything else, but he's great at outside sales. So we're going to kind of put him off on this island over here, and he's in the outside sales, team by himself, where he can't affect our operations. He can't affect our culture. He can't affect how we do what we do, which is the standard part of the business, but we're not going to lose him. And Jim, so you stay over here in this entity, but everyone else, we're going to do this. And that works fine too, because if you come up with a series of principles that work really good for 90% of your business, there could be 10% of your business that really does need to be wild, innovative, disruptive. And you just have to make sure you put a little division there. Sometimes I call those departmental directives. And so I allow a certain department to have a different directive, a tangential one. They're going to follow maybe 70% of the principles, but 30% of them they're not. And that's okay. And this is usually with larger companies. But you have to always live in reality. And we call them principles because, they're not going to be followed 100% of the time, but you're always pursuing them and you've decided that they're the best for this type of business, for your type of business. And for me to get the buy-in, I'll do it live, and I'll pick the person who's probably going to be least likely to buy into it. And then let's just say his name is Jim again. I'll say, Jim, so if this is your business, what do you think of these principles? And Jim will say, yeah, look good. And then I'll say, okay, Jim, so the owner's going to be gone on a 1-year vacation. You're in charge of the business. These are your principles. You like them. So Jim, what do you say if Sally over here doesn't follow this principle of punctuality? She shows up late to work tomorrow. What are you going to do? And then he'll tell her to show up on time. And then I'll say, what if Sally's late by 20 minutes the next day? And then what if next week she's late by an hour? And then I keep pushing his buttons again and again and again. And the point is, I want eventually Jim to say in front of the whole company, you know what, I would have to fire her because she's not following our principles. And if these principles matter, then she's gone. And if Jim says that in front of the whole group, then you can say as the owner that you agree with Jim, and Jim's probably the one who's the biggest rebel. And you think, you know what, I agree with Jim. If anyone consistently goes against these principles, then they can't work here anymore. And then it kind of sets the tone, how serious they are. They're not just feel-good sayings. It actually is a hiring and firing offense.
That is a smooth psychology move, Josh. Nicely done. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, it's always fun to get the reaction because they know where they're going with it. I usually do timeliness, and I'll pick the person who's always late, and the owner's been telling me this person's always late. And then I'll put them on the spot and I'll say, how are you going to feel if this person keeps showing up late to your business and they keep, again and again and define these principles. And this principle says that, people who are late don't respect the customers, and eventually they kind of get it and they're like, I guess I can act dumb and like I don't really know what's going on. And it tends to work really well. We keep it light. I mean, people want the place to be a good place to work, an enjoyable place, and no one's perfect, but it's just a assimilation is efficient. So if everyone believes the same things, buys into the same things, is excited about the same things, it just makes it a cohesive culture, a team. If there's nothing to assimilate around, then whoever has the strongest personality or is the loudest ends up, fracturing the business, and they end up choosing the culture. And you want a culture by design that's designed around business strategy as opposed to a culture by, just by random default. And it can get really cancerous and messy fast.
Well, and that's so important for our listeners. We are the Profit by Design podcast. We're all interested in designing our businesses to be sustainably profitable, and the systems and the team, designing the team and designing the experience is a part of that. So
I'm not sure if the listeners on this particular podcast know the actual website, Work the System, but if they want to find out more about, the things I'm talking about, or more about Sam's, story from going to 100-hour work weeks to 1-hour work weeks and the transformation, I do want to make sure that people know they can get the book for free at workthesystem.com.
Yeah, that's a fantastic resource. Mike and I have been reading the book. There's a lot of really good insights in there. And one that we didn't really have a chance to dig into on the podcast yet is the personal life and how systems play out in our personal life and our self-care. And I really appreciate that in the book, that is peppered in there. Can you speak a little bit about the self-care side and how systems play into that?
Definitely. Yeah, that was one of the first ahas for me. Was Sam was talking about relationship systems and communication systems. And I never really thought about my relationships with my wife, with my kids, with my parents, with my sister in terms of a system. And once I got that, I thought, okay, well, there's certain rhythms that I would need to set up if I wanted a certain result. So I wanted a certain level of relationship with my sister who lives in Louisiana, right where you live. And so I'm in Arizona. So as opposed to just being by default, I'm going to call her every other week. I'm going to call her and see how life's going. And my parents, they live in Michigan. I'm going to set up a system where I have a long chat with them once a week. Just a repeatable system. My wife, we try to go on 2 date nights a week, but sometimes it's 1. And we go on a walk every night together. So we got to walk every night. And so it's a system with my kids. It's a little Bible study in the morning. So we kind of develop, okay, what's important in my life? And then depending on how important it is, how do I set up a repeatable system so that it keeps happening again and again and again, as opposed to just, if I have time or if somehow I get lucky. And so I do think that it's a huge thing to focus on. So for me, I'm a little bit strange in the way I design my business, but I put in the personal systems and my family systems. We homeschool our 3 kids. I put those all in. I stack those all into my schedule first. And then I put the business systems second. So it's definitely maybe different than most people. And maybe not everyone can make that happen. But that's an important thing for me to kind of put the one before the other.
Oh, no, I'm a huge advocate of systems at home. That's how we live. In my household, I'm a single mom. And I've gotten my kids to the point now where they can get themselves ready for school in the morning, and I can be outside. I love to do yard work this time of year. I love to be out in the yard piddling around. So I go out in the yard and do those things. And I have learned if I come into the house when I'm not supposed to, and I have air marks around supposed to, because as my oldest daughter will remind me, you're not supposed to be here, Mom. You're going to screw things up. And inevitably the meltdowns will ensue if I walk in the house before I'm supposed to be in the house.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, you're an odd person in a good way.
I'm an odd person. I know I'm an odd
And
person.
but I think it's good to embrace that, because normal is dysfunctional and horrible. I mean, I'd rather be very peculiar in the way. So we've got checklists for our kids that they follow each day. And I met this, not to go on a long tangent, but I met this guy who was a widow. He had 6 kids and lived out in the backcountry, and he was a scientist, and he wanted his kids to, strong religious convictions. He wanted his kids to be brought up a certain way, and he wanted them to be educated at home. And he was going to work full time. And so he set up a system where each of his kids could self-teach, self-learn, and develop their own curriculum. And all of his kids ended up getting full ride scholarships and PhDs. And he said he spent, less than an hour per day teaching all 6 of them for that to happen. And I was like, well, how do you do that? And they only did 2 meals a day too. So 1 big meal in the morning and 1 big meal in the evening. Because he said, scientifically, you don't need more meals than that. And so he just had this, it was so peculiar. And I was like, how is this crazy guy doing this? And then I thought, you know what? I think that's the first thing, is to embrace, what do you want out of your life, your business, your family? And then we build the systems to make that happen, regardless of how it looks from the outside. You don't even make being normal any criteria you're going after. And then if you do that, you can be exceptional in the ways that you actually are designed to be, and actually pursue a destiny that is, I think, way more exciting that you're built for, as opposed to just, well, how do I fit in and what's normal? And, because then you're just frittering away your time.
So systems in our personal lives designed around the way we want to be. That's pretty powerful. And the other piece of that is just exercising and taking care of our bodies. And there in the book, he really talks about how he was dealing with these crazy long hours and he wasn't sleeping well. And he actually Sam went so far as to get blood work done to see what was out of balance in his system. And he's just started systematically addressing each piece one after the other. And I think for us as entrepreneurs, many of the listeners are in that high stress state, and there's many things that are out of whack. So just taking that step back and looking at, for our own lives and taking care of our health, what are the things, the systems that we can start putting in place so that we can have better health and better self-care?
Oh yeah. And it's live in reality. So if you want to work long hours, a deep focus, and give your best primary machine yourself, just can't run on fumes, right? So what you put in does matter, both into your brain, whatever you're reading and listening to, but also whatever you're eating and drinking. And so, yeah, we're pretty hyper about that in our household, because we want to treat our bodies well, because we know that's the vehicle for doing all of the activities of our life. And so it's a huge thing. And you can't pretend like putting junk in your body is going to yield a result long-term. And I think this kind of goes back to this idea of long-term thinking with the systems and as an investment, and in yourself as an investment. And again, just determining, like, do you want to be a bodybuilder or just in shape? Do you want to be, you determine the final result, and then you build the mechanical system to get there. Is that going for a walk every evening, or is that lifting heavy weights? And you determine what is going to be the protocol to make that happen, and building space for it consistently, because otherwise work never ends as an entrepreneur. I mean, if you want it to, it can consume every second, every breath, every thought, unless you put it in its proper pace and you put some structure around it. And, as a typical employee gets their, 8 to 5 structure, you have got to do the same for yourself. If you don't, you're going to burn out, and your company it'll end like most of them, right? So you have to decide to do things differently.
Yeah. So Mike, do you want to take us out of here with any final thoughts?
I have a little funny story. So I received the book over the weekend on Saturday, right before Mother's Day. And so after we had brunch, so my mom was over and my mother-in-law was my wife and my daughter. I grabbed the book and I started, just looking through it, start reading some of it. So I asked my daughter to get a highlighter. And I said, there's tons of things in here that I need to highlight right now. So she finds me a highlighter and I'm going crazy in the book and just highlighting all these things in the book. And my mother-in-law looks at me and she's like, I can't believe you're doing that. She's like, the way I was raised is that, or, back in the day, like destroy books with highlighters and folding pages and writing and doing all these things. And I was like, but you don't understand. There's so many things in this book that I need to write down and highlight and just mark right now. One of the things that really resonated with me was there's a paragraph that talks about the puzzle pieces and that there's a infinite number of puzzle pieces out there. And for each of us to get what we want in our lives, it's a matter of seeing those pieces, making proper selection, and then assembling them in a way that produces the results we desire. That to me was really, it was huge. It really resonated with me. And I think, it's so important to get those puzzle pieces that we want in our business and in our personal lives and just, strive for more, just reach our goals, strive for more efficiency and just overall betterment.
Yeah. Each person's puzzle picture, final outcome can be vastly different. That's okay, but you should not let it stay a disorganized mess, but proactively, take control, take charge of your life and actually decide what is the picture going to look like, and then start putting those pieces together one at a time, as opposed to pushing the pieces around in a circle and realizing why is the picture not coming down straight.
Yeah. So Josh, tell us one more time where our profit designers can get a copy of Work the System.
Definitely. Yeah. So if you go to workthesystem.com, you will be able to download the book for free. So go to worksystem.com. And then certainly if you peruse the site, there's a lot of other resources to help people. And our flagship thing, and if you're serious and you're saying, I really want to make a difference. I'm working too many hours. I'm stressed out and, cash strapped, then I would highly recommend for small business owners to sign up for the group coaching program. That's really the one that we've been doing it so many years for so many entrepreneurs that if you do the program, pretty much guarantee you're going to have more time, less stress, and more income by the time you're done.
And then that is a beautiful thing. Thank you for being with us, Josh. We learned a lot today.
We did.
This was fun. No, I enjoyed it. It's great.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Profit by Design podcast Facebook group. Share your thoughts on today's episode, ask us questions, and let us know what you want to hear about next. Visit our website at profitbydesignpodcast.com to access resources from our sponsors and tools we've created for you. Subscribe to the show on whatever platform you're listening to right now. There's a subscribe button right there. Go ahead and hit it so that you always get a notification when we release a new episode. And finally, share our podcast with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. Thanks again for listening. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this.